Wait, so people are people are getting deported from Mexico?
Protests in Mexico City turned violent over the weekend as protesters took to the streets. People gathered calmly to express concerns about issues like rising rents, displacement of locals, and how tourism is affecting their neighborhoods.
So as the issue of illegal immigration continues to play a major role right here in America, there's another immigration crisis out there nobody's talking about, taking place in Mexico, a country whose economy benefits greatly from illegal U.S. border crossings. Yet recently, riots have broken out, with locals rising up against foreigners who've...
Huh. I mean, I'm not gonna... It's like, I wonder why. Not that these people... I don't even know if these people deserve it. But if they're benefiting from coming here, and now we're sending them back there...
legally entered their country. And these rioters, they only want one thing, and that's to get rid of the Americans.
These protesters in Mexico City say cross-border migration is changing their country's capital for the worse. Over the last decade, an influx of mostly American so-called digital nomads have moved here to work remotely and also enjoy a cheaper cost of living.
My name is Derek Morgan Jr. I'm 34 years old and live in Mexico City. I'm on track to make more than $350,000 a year in 2025. I've always loved traveling. I've been to 60 countries so far. One thing about travel is just I really love to explore new cultures, new food, new people.
I feel like it wasn't that long ago.
Wait, what is he doing to do that?
Who some of these people were. It's hipsters with the laptops, with the remote jobs who are like, it's so cheap here, I'm moving here. And I am wondering how they are handling it. A lot of them are probably like, well, they don't mean me.
I'm here because gentrification is just one more step towards colonization, dispossession, and the exploitation of our resources.
If they're going to live in a country, they have to contribute to that country. They come here with visas or no visas, and still the change in purchasing power generates these problems.
What the fuck? Isn't that what everyone was saying here? So no, these people probably shouldn't be doing that over there.
I think this story proves that everybody likes borders.
That's basically what I was saying.
So Americans living in Mexico are being blamed for many of the country's
Kinda based.
problems. But even though this is incredibly ironic, nobody's focusing enough on the fact that the Americans in Mexico, they came in legally, which might make this even...
But that's wrong, though. If they're there legally, wrong.
more
But I mean, if there is a large majority of people who are there illegally, but if they're all just there illegally, then there's nothing for them to be mad about. Be mad at the lawmakers. It's all just more get the people to fight against each other than looking at the real problem.
Because it's one thing to protest illegal immigration,
because your laws must have allowed it somehow,
and quite another to protest the presence of people who came into a country obeying all of its laws, which America...
And the fact is, if they're making all this money there, I'm sure they're spending money in your city. These people are nuts.
Americans in Mexico can do for up to 180 days without even needing a visa, provided they support themselves and are not a drain on Mexico's non-existent welfare state. And with many Americans bringing their incomes with them south of the border, the presence of rich foreigners in Mexico City does a similar thing to what it's doing right here in New York City, where people with higher incomes earn money and then spend it on things like rent and food, which is where these riots in Mexico City come in, where the agitators are voicing concerns about the rising cost of living in their community. However, housing costs and living costs in general could be addressed by their government, who could incentivize things like new home construction to alleviate any shortages brought about by foreign workers. Which brings us to the real reason these riots are not aimed at the Mexican government or even the Mexican cartels. Oh no, these riots are focusing their ire squarely on Americans who are in front of them and are a living, breathing example of everything they say is wrong with their country. At the same time, these low IQ radicals who are suspiciously acting just like their counterparts in major American cities are protesting the exact same issues. Donald Trump, border security, and government policies that may not favor the people of their country. Yet Mexico benefits greatly from its relationship with the United States, no matter how dysfunctional, and if Mexico were touching Canada instead of America, things would be very different. But because these rioters don't realize that, they're willing to send their own country back to the Stone Age. You know, I wonder if any of these rioters were in America at one point and either got deported or self-deported over the last few months. The behavior is very similar to what we see in some of our major cities. Regardless, the easiest way to stop this would be for the Mexican government to deploy police and stick up for foreigners who legally enter their country and obey their laws, as well as doubling down on policies that would help locals afford to live in their own cities, like new housing construction. But as you're about to see, that's not what's happening here at all.
Pues el día de hoy estamos luchando contra la gentrificación. La gentrificación es este proceso por el cual las personas originarias de los barrios se ven desplazadas por gente con mayor poder adquisitivo. Es decir, gente que viene de otros países, en su mayoría extranjeros, a querer imponer su cultura, sus precios y desplazar a los mexicanos, a los nativos de estas tierras.
The protests started peacefully Friday in neighborhoods popular with foreign visitors. People gathered calmly to express concerns about.
Okay, so keep in mind, the person.
Kind of weird, all these protests and stuff are happening all around.
They just interviewed, he's mad about legal immigration. I wonder if he'd be even angrier if he knew that some of the people in Mexico City snuck in without permission. We don't have any evidence that that's happened, but my guess is that would probably only make things worse. But many of the businesses that you see here being destroyed, they aren't just run by people who've come into Mexico. They also employ people who are locals in the area. The owners of these stores and people renting these apartments pay rent to Mexican landowners, and they buy food from Mexican business owners at grocery stores and put money back into the local economy. And more economic activity just encourages people to get into that economy too as it grows, which creates jobs and raises people's standard of living. And folks I've talked to who live in Mexico City say that these rioters represent a very small but very loud, lawless minority opinion. But look at who it is that they are upset with.
Is home for me for the foreseeable future. My name is Derek Morgan Jr. I'm 34 years old and live in Mexico City. I'm on track to make more than $350,000 a year in 2025. I'm a full-service trademark attorney, so that could be anything from a trademark search, trademark prosecution, trademark representation, litigation.
So it says here, Derek is a lawyer who runs his own trademark-focused firm, and he's also not breaking any laws by living in Mexico City. He came into the country legally, and you know,
he's a lawyer. I'm sure he knows what he's doing.
Something, no matter where Derek lives, there will be people who look at him and his life with deep-seated envy. Even in America, there are those who would vilify a business owner with his level of income and claim that he's part of the problems everybody in the world is facing. However, the kind of money he makes in a place where many locals are struggling to pay rent and food and utilities of their own, it represents a massive wealth gap. And what protesters are worried about is that their society could become a two-tiered system where you have the super rich and then you have everybody else, without taking into account how money flowing into their economy raises everyone's standard of living.
Mexico City is about half the price of Chicago. It is affordable, but it's not cheap. So my expenses for rent here, it's around $2,000. A similar apartment in Chicago would probably be around $4,000 to $5,000. I like to think of myself as a pretty frugal guy. I do like to splurge on food and eat out a lot. I think I spend around $1,500 to $2,000 a month eating out. However, outside of food, I try to keep a lot of.
Doesn't spend money on transportation. Doesn't have a car.
My expenses low, but as a business owner, I am able to.
In the city, you don't need a car. Uber, bike rentals.
officer.
So, okay, his housing and utilities, it says $2,000, but even though you can get an apartment in New York for around $2,000 in certain parts of town, there's no way it's going to look like the place he's walking around in, and this $1,000 that he spent.
The guy's living in like a penthouse for $2,000.
On food in a place like Mexico City, he's not going to be eating ramen noodles out of a can like he'd be eating in New York. But shockingly, for most of the people in Mexico City, $2,000 is nearly 3 months worth of wages, and that's just what he spends on rent. There's no way local people could.
$2,000 is 3 months of income for the average person. So it's 670, it's just under $700 a month. $33. 666. $600. Yeah, just under $700 a month.
Rent type of apartment that he's moved into, and many of the people in Mexico City can only walk by the type of apartment building he lives in, and can only walk by the restaurants that he might be able to afford to eat at regularly. In New York, it's the same thing. You can walk by thousands of restaurants in some of the priciest parts of Manhattan where the menu prices are just so high that eating there on a regular basis isn't feasible. Even some of these places are charging $6, $7.
This shit, the stuff that we're talking about here is probably it already happens all over. People having money in businesses, offshore bank accounts, untaxed, tax evasion, who knows? Not that I'm sure this guy lawyer's doing it legally, but that shit's already. I think you're mad at the wrong people.
For a coffee, which is why it's much cheaper to make your own at home. But it appears that most of the businesses these rioters have targeted are those that cater to a foreign crowd, not the local crowd.
The white hipsters with the laptops, with the remote jobs, who are like, it's so cheap here, I'm moving here. And I am wondering how they are handling it.
Mm-hmm. I'd be terrified.
A lot of them are probably like, well, they don't mean me, right?
Yeah.
They're probably like, no, when I go to the coffee shop, I say, hola.
Hola.
I'm sure they love it when you walk in and you go, oh, things are so cheap in this country.
Yeah. They probably are walking around, hola.
Hola, donde farmacia?
I bet some of them are probably will be protesting with them at some point. Oh, exactly.
That's an interesting thing to think of. I wonder how many Americans are in these crowds that you see down here destroying businesses, and where did they learn that behavior? They learned it here in our country, destroying businesses and shops in major cities. And you know something? The people that I know who live in Mexico City right now, they tell me that they would never consider moving back to America. They plan on staying there forever, and even though I think that some of these folks are smart, they do well for themselves, to a degree they've given up on our country. They don't see it as a place where the American dream is available for them. They think there's more opportunity elsewhere, which is why they've left. So in order to leave America and live somewhere else, you kind of have to give up on America in some manner.
I love this. I celebrate the people of Mexico protesting this. This is fantastic. These white Americans going down there and taking the jobs that they don't want.
Yeah,
no,
the lawyer.
Without white people in Mexico, who's going to complain about the service at Starbucks? It is kind of a colonization, and maybe it's just the affluent whites. Maybe we should send like a lower people on the socio-economic totem pole, like Los Angeles. They have a homeless problem, you know. Send them down there. We should have ambassadors all over the globe.
So the interesting thing about this is, since you can't go to Mexico as a foreigner and qualify for state-sponsored living, like you can't go down there and get free health care and get a whole bunch of government benefits, there's really no incentive for poor people to come in legally and just be poor in Mexico. However, in the United States, things are different. You got sanctuary states like California that have health care plans that everybody can just sign up for, whether they're here legally or not. And there's no incentive in Mexico for people to sneak into the country and then just have to work and provide for themselves. Plus, you can't even really do that if you're US. You get to stay down there for up to 6 months without even needing a visa, so you can't sneak in. Everyone's automatically legal. And the big difference between the protests in Mexico City is that they're protesting legal immigration, which is totally sanctioned by their government.
So listen, prices going up. Okay, I mean I don't know. It doesn't feel real. It feels like, you know, a few people were paid to just go out there and, you know, make a few bucks. It's so vital for their economy to get this kind of money, and where they're going, it's like, you know, it's not the heartland. It's like not the rural area where,
yeah,
you know,
isn't it the tourists, their number one kind of?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
That and the cartels. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wouldn't they want the money?
Nobody protesting the cartels, right? So.
In their economy?
That is a good point.
So basically, the point that he's making here is, without people coming into Mexico and investing in it, starting businesses, opening companies, employing people locally, the country would be worse off. The standard of living overall would be lower. If these businesses all get destroyed and everyone leaves, the rioters will accomplish their goal, but now everybody just gets to have nothing together. But they point out here that nobody's really angry with the cartels or the Mexican government, and that's probably because illegal immigration into America helps Mexico greatly. For example, if you're poor in Mexico, well, if you're able to sneak into America and come into a sanctuary city, if you could sign up for government benefits and get help with things like healthcare, food, clothing, and a place to live, you'll be better off than you'd be if you stayed in Mexico. So the very poor, the ultra poor who live in Mexico, have every incentive to leave, especially if America decides, hey, we're not going to enforce our border. We're just going to let everybody who comes in stay here. And yeah, you can claim asylum and you might be able to stay for several years while that works its way through the court. With a system like that, it's no wonder we had a massive asylum crisis over the last few years.
Michelle, you know what's funny is their big criticism is assimilation. And I mean, what is wrong with assimilation? Nothing is wrong with it.
I think this story proves that everybody likes borders.
Yeah.
You know,
Kinda
if you're
does.
xenophobic, then what is this? Is this xenophobic?
Mm-hmm.
It used to be that everyone wanted to be like America. Like, we want their Levi's, we want their movie stars and their movies, you know, we want their rock singers. Now they just want our protests.
Yeah.
And they want words like colonization and, you know, gentrification and all those cool words. It's like all those kids in that protest went to Columbia and Harvard and then went back home and threw the same protest that...
I know. Where did people learn this protesting radical behavior? It's almost the exact same thing. It's the same people. They've got a similar message. They hate the same things. They all hate President Trump for some reason.
I got the same exact vibe as soon as I started hearing all of this.
And even though he doesn't live in Mexico and he's trying to close the border and he wants more border security, on top of that, Americans aren't upset about legal immigration. No, Americans voted for Trump because he said he was going to stop illegal immigration. But we did get a response from the Mexican government about these protests, and you're not going to believe what stance they're taking.
According to the New York Times, Mexico City's
That's some
government
dangerous shit. If that shit catches up to the fucking can.
secretary urged
Oh,
an
hell
end to the
no.
violence, saying Mexico City is a city of migrants and that the city's government does not agree with this type of demonstration. The city's governor, Carla Brugada, released a statement on X denouncing the violence. However, she said Mexico City officials oppose gentrification and are working on making housing more affordable.
Look, I don't know anything about Mexican politics, but if the leaders over there are not encouraging the protests, they might even be Republicans. Can you believe that? They didn't go out and tell these protesters that they're on the side of justice, something that our leaders here in various sanctuary cities are telling our protesters. Where did these protesters come from? Is somebody funding them? They look pretty well organized in these videos, and they seem to be doing the exact same thing to the protesters here in America. Let me know. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.
That's exactly what I was saying. It looks suspicious.
affecting their neighborhood.
That's basically what I said. The government allowed it. If people are upset, they need to take it up with the government.